The cold October morning of 2015 began with an unusual disturbance on the quiet road leading to the edge of Salt Creek Forest in Bloomington, Indiana. 4 unmarked police cars silently pulled up in front of a modest one-story house where Mark Kinsey had lived quietly for many years. Neighbors peeked through curtains as tactical geared officers fanned out around the area, taking up positions as if preparing for an action long in the planning. Inside, 56-year-old Mark Kinsey was brewing his morning coffee, a routine he had maintained for more than 3 decades since the day his wife Laura vanished without a trace. A rapid knock came at 7:14 a.m. Mark Kinsey, Indiana State Police. We have a warrant for your arrest in connection with the disappearance of Laura Kinsey in 1981. One officer later recalled that Mark's hand trembled slightly as he set down his coffee cup, but his face remained eerily calm, as if he had known this moment would come. Just not that it would arrive on this particular morning. Before diving deeper into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest cases. In October 1981, Bloomington, Indiana, operated with the rhythm of a typical college town. Peaceful, orderly, small streets covered in golden leaves, and Indiana University students scattered across the coffee shops around the central square. The residents were mostly university staff, small business owners, and young families, forming a friendly but fairly private community where any unusual change was easily noticed. Among those residents was 22-year-old Laura Kinsey, an employee at the Indiana University Credit Union. She was known for her highly regular schedule, waking up early, preparing a light breakfast, then leaving home on time for her workplace just a few minutes' drive away. Laura lived with her husband, 23-year-old Mark Kinsey, who had recently gone through a period of unemployment and typically stayed home in the mornings, maintaining a habit of sleeping in later than his wife and handling small chores around the house. On the morning of October 17, the Bloomington weather was chilly, with temperatures around 7 degrees Celsius, 45 degrees Fahrenheit, a foggy sky but bright enough to clearly see the road by just after 6 a.m. Around 6:15, a neighbor across the street saw Laura step out onto the front yard to pick up the morning newspaper, a familiar sight that raised no immediate red flags. As usual, she would return inside, brew coffee, change clothes, and prepare to leave before 7 a.m. However, at 6:31 a.m., an emergency call was logged from the Kinsey home phone. The call lasted only a few seconds, long enough to capture Laura's hurried voice before a loud impact sound occurred and the line was abruptly cut off. Call data showed no reconnection attempt afterward. Around 6:34, Mark left the bedroom and discovered Laura was not in the kitchen, living room, or anywhere in the house. He noticed the back door slightly ajar, something Laura, per her daily habits, would never leave open while it was still dark. Mark called out for his wife, but received no response. By nearly 7 a.m., Laura's family was notified that she could not be reached. They tried calling the landline multiple times with no answer. A relative went to the Kinsey home to check and confirmed Laura was not there, and she had taken neither her purse, wallet, nor any personal items. Given the successive anomalies, the interrupted emergency call, Laura's disappearance in an extremely short window, and the unexplained open back door, the family decided to report it to the Bloomington Police Department, officially declaring Laura Kinsey missing. The Bloomington Police Department received the missing person report early that morning and dispatched a patrol unit to 2145 South Lincoln Street within less than 10 minutes. Upon arrival, officers first approached the surrounding area to ensure no immediate hazards, then entered the house through the front door, which remained properly locked as the family had described. Inside, the living room and kitchen were tidy, with no signs of disturbance or broken items. Details such as chairs in place, an unused coffee cup, and a neatly folded kitchen towel on the table indicated no struggle or hasty departure. Police checked all windows and doors, noting the back door as the sole anomaly, undamaged, hinges intact, latch open from the inside. This ruled out forced entry, but raised questions about why the door was opened in the dark, at a time when morning temperatures were just above 7 degrees Celsius, and dew still thick on the grass. Investigators paid attention to the tile floor just inside the back door. No fresh dirt, no clear shoe prints, no water or mud tracks that an outsider entering from the backyard would typically leave. The lawn outside the back door had a thin layer of dew, but no reliable drag marks or footprints were observed. This led police to document the observations, while noting the evidence value as low due to dew potentially obscuring traces. While sweeping the hallway from the bedroom to the kitchen, they noted an unusual stillness, nothing out of place. This was recorded for comparison with earlier reports of unusual sounds. In addition to the physical survey, police collected data on the 6:31 a.m. emergency call, including exact duration, time of disconnection, and preliminary background audio analysis. They noted the call ended within seconds with no callback attempt. This was a key fact, establishing the maximum time frame during which Laura was still in or near the house before disappearing. The patrol unit assessed possible outsider access routes. The backyard led to a small path connecting to a narrow, low-traffic road, but there were no recent reports of strangers in the area. Police questioned Mark about morning activities in the house when he woke up, his position when realizing Laura was not in the kitchen, and when he discovered the back door open. Mark provided preliminary time estimates, which police recorded as initial data without drawing conclusions. The patrol unit also asked about who had house keys, recent visitors, Laura's schedule, and any early departures or errands in the preceding week. All were entered into the initial investigation report to build the first time-space picture of the disappearance. No personal items of Laura were missing, no purse gone, no sign she left prepared. From the overall scene, police completed their report. The house showed no signs of forced entry, no signs of struggle, no clear footprints entering or leaving, and the interrupted call was the last confirmed trace of the victim's presence. All this data served as foundational information for the next phase of the investigation. In the first working session after completing the scene documentation, police interviewed Mark Kinsey to gather precise details about the morning schedule before Laura's disappearance. The goal was to create an original timeline based solely on Mark's account, to serve as a baseline for cross-checking with physical evidence and future witness statements. Mark said he woke up around 6:00 or a little earlier, but did not remember the exact minute. He described getting out of bed, going to the hallway bathroom to wash his face, taking a few minutes before returning to the bedroom. According to Mark, during this time, Laura was still downstairs and he heard a small noise but could not specify what kind. When asked for the exact timing of the sound, Mark said he did not look at a clock and only estimated it fell between 6:20 and 6:25. This was the first period police flagged as lacking independent verification, since Mark was the only person in the house and no witness saw or heard him during that window. Mark continued that he left the bedroom around 6:30, heading downstairs intending to call Laura for breakfast. Upon reaching the kitchen, he did not see his wife and noticed the back door slightly open. Mark insisted he did not recall hearing the door open earlier and heard no footsteps or loud noises. When asked to recount the exact sequence of actions, whether he went down the stairs first or through the living room first, how long he observed the house before searching for Laura, Mark gave approximate answers without specific time points. Police noted this as a second, unverified period for his location, from leaving the bedroom until seeing the open back door. A key detail in the interview was when Mark learned about the interrupted emergency call. When asked if he heard the landline ring afterward or knew Laura had called for help, Mark said he heard no such signal and only learned about it when police informed him. This established a clear marker from 6:31 system-logged call time to 6:34. When Mark claimed he went to the kitchen, he had no objective corroborating data for his activities. Based on his statement, police constructed the original timeline. 6:85, Mark wakes up, goes to bathroom. 6:85, 6:20, Mark in bedroom, activity unclear and unwitnessed. 6:20 to 6:25, Mark hears small noise, no clear description. 6:25 to 6:30, Mark upstairs, no sight of Laura. 6:25:31, Laura's emergency call logged by system. 6:34, Mark goes to kitchen, discovers Laura missing and back door ajar. Police flagged 2 unverified windows, 6:05 to 6:25 to 6:35 and 6:35 to 6:34. These were considered high-risk segments in timeline analysis, as Mark was the sole source for those periods. Alongside the timeline, police recorded behaviors Mark described for later comparison: reason for sleeping late, previous night's sleep quality, Laura's morning habits, rooms he passed through, and time spent searching before contacting family. All data was organized into a table with columns: time, Mark's described action, supporting data, level of verification. This original timeline was preserved as the baseline for subsequent investigation stages, with the note that all current information reflected only one side and had not been validated by any independent factor. After completing the initial statement collection and original timeline, police proceeded to the next step in the missing person protocol, beginning with a close-range search within a 1-mile radius of the Kinsey home. This area included small residential streets, narrow sidewalks, neighboring backyards, some private sheds, and part of an earthen path leading south from the neighborhood. A K-9 unit was deployed starting at the back door, where Laura was believed to have left based on the door's open state and Mark's discovery time. The tracking dog began scenting from the doorframe, following toward the backyard lawn, crossing a thin strip where dew had accumulated most heavily. The K-9 gave a positive reaction in the first 20 meters, indicating Laura had likely passed through or an object carrying her scent had been moved there. However, as it approached the earthen path connecting to the narrow road behind the row of houses, the scent signal weakened and eventually disappeared entirely. Police marked this as a Level 1 scent loss point, meaning the area required expanded searching in both directions along the path to determine if a vehicle had stopped or if any spot was suitable for concealing evidence. The search team divided into 4 small groups, checking each shed, each backyard, and areas with limited visibility, such as wall corners, low porches, shrub clusters, or fenced sections. Each group was required to document the physical condition of each location, whether shed doors were locked or open, whether ground showed fresh trampling, whether trash cans or containers had been rummaged or moved. When inspecting a small shed about 150 meters from the Kinsey home, Group 2 found a faint shoe print on the dirt floor, but it was too unclear to determine size or direction. Moreover, its timing was uncertain, so it was recorded as reference data, not direct evidence. Some scattered items like food wrappers, plastic ties, or cardboard fragments were collected but quickly ruled out as unrelated to the victim or lacking identifying marks. Neighboring backyards were thoroughly checked. No clothing, jewelry, purse, shoes, or any personal items matching Laura's description were found. Police particularly searched areas of flattened grass, compressed soil, or fresh tire ruts to assess possible vehicle visits. However, early dew and high humidity made trace identification difficult. A few soil depressions were noted but lacked distinctive features for conclusions. When the search team inspected a drainage ditch beside the earthen path, they found only decayed leaves and branches, no personal items or signs of dragging or forced movement. Summarizing all data collected within the 1-mile radius, police concluded no personal belongings of Laura were dropped, no indication she left with luggage, and no clear physical evidence she moved far beyond the backyard on her own. The scent loss point on the earthen path was considered the most significant field data from the initial search, serving as the basis for determining the next expansion direction in the investigation. The unproductive close-range search around the neighborhood prompted Bloomington police to scale up, mobilizing additional personnel from the Monroe County Sheriff's Office and Indiana State Police support units to cover the adjacent Hoosier National Forest area, which featured expansive terrain, numerous trails, and the nearest natural zone from the initial scent loss point. The focus of this phase was to determine whether Laura could have moved or been moved into the forest in the short time after the interrupted call. Based on morning wind direction recorded from the local weather station, light wind from the southwest, and the gently sloping terrain from the neighborhood down to forest trails, the search team established priority search lines along 2 main axes, along County Road 446, where the K-9 lost the trail, and expanding southeast, deeper into old-growth forest. The coordination unit decided to implement a grid search model to ensure no area was missed. The entire forest edge within a 1-mile radius of Road 446 was divided into small rectangular grids, each assigned to a team of 3 to 4 people. Search groups were instructed to observe the ground in 3 layers: grass and leaf litter, suspicious depressions or hollows that could indicate dragging or placement of heavy objects, and surface items such as dropped clothing or papers. The sweep also included checking tree trunks and underbrush near trails for fabric snags, fibers, or any material that could catch on branches during forced movement. When the K-9 was brought back to the southern path scent loss point, results reconfirmed that Laura's scent ended precisely at the edge of County Road 446 and did not continue into the forest as in a pedestrian scenario. This suggested 2 possibilities. Laura did not walk into the forest, or the scent was blocked by terrain factors. However, cross-referencing with the sudden K-9 loss at a vehicle-accessible location gave greater weight to the hypothesis that the victim was loaded into a vehicle. During the search along this road, police noted unevenly compacted soil on the shoulder, but nothing clear enough to identify vehicle type. A few disturbed soil patches near forest entrances were noted and photographed, though early dew and high humidity limited on-site analysis. The search expanded to secondary trails deeper into the forest, checking mounds, open areas, and soft soil segments where footprints, if present, would be more visible. Concurrently, Another group inspected a nearby dry creek bed, a potential spot for retaining shoe prints or dropped items during movement. All unusual objects were collected or flagged for later comparison, but in this phase, no items directly linked to Laura were confirmed. Search reports noted that the entire Forest Edge area near Road 446 showed no evidence Laura voluntarily moved deep into the woods on foot. Search forces assessed that if Laura left the residential area shortly after the interrupted call, the likelihood of her traveling far by foot was very low. Given the absence of matching traces and the extremely narrow time window, combining terrain data, canine tracking results, and scent loss location, police established the central working hypothesis. The victim was likely removed from the area by motor vehicle between 6:31 and approximately 6:40 a.m., a period of light traffic that would allow avoidance of attention. The expanded search in Hoosier National Forest concluded that day with a report of no direct traces found, but provided one pivotal piece of information guiding the investigation. County Road 446 and its adjoining forest area became a key focal point, requiring deeper analysis in subsequent steps. During the expanded search, police simultaneously received a series of reports from residents claiming they had seen a woman resembling Laura at various locations around Bloomington. These sightings were documented according to standard procedure, but all required verification to determine their authenticity before being incorporated into the main investigative direction. Some people reported seeing a young woman waiting for a bus near Kirkwood Street around 7 a.m., but cross-checking with traffic cameras and vehicle flow at the time showed no matching images. Another report came from the Bedford area, more than 20 miles from Bloomington, where a man claimed to have encountered a confused woman asking for directions. After checking the physical description and timing, police determined the woman was a local gas station employee. Similarly, a report of a woman jogging in a panicked manner on Old State Road 37 was ruled out when investigators confirmed the person was a university student living nearby. After reviewing all sightings within the first 24 hours, police concluded that none provided a credible trace of Laura leaving Bloomington or appearing in a public area after the time of her disappearance. Shifting focus back to the neighborhood, police interviewed witness groups living around the Kinsey home to gather any unusual auditory or movement signals that might be relevant. Among these, the most notable statement came from Bobby Langford, a neighbor living 2 houses away from the Kinseys. Bobby reported that around 6:20 a.m., he heard a sound like a tense exchange, though the content was unclear, but distinct enough to stand out from the usual early morning neighborhood routine. When asked about the direction of the sound, Bobby pinpointed it as coming from the area between the Kinsey house and the neighboring one, aligning with the location of the back door frame. The timing Bobby provided fell within the period when Mark claimed he was still upstairs and had not yet interacted with Laura, thus creating a point that needed to be flagged for cross-referencing. Another witness, Mrs. June Whitford, who lived in the house behind, stated that she saw an unusually quick movement near the back fence of the Kinsey property between approximately 6:25 and 6:28 a.m. She could not identify whether it was a person or an object, but the direction of the movement was from the Kinsey back door toward the earthen path, the same route the K-9 unit had followed. When asked about the quality of her observation, Mrs. June described her view as limited by early morning fog and shrubbery, making specific identification impossible. Nevertheless, the timing and direction she noted were entered into the data table for comparison. After collecting all the information, police cross-referenced the witness statements with Mark's original timeline. A comparison table was created with 3 axes: time, source location of sound or movement, and degree of alignment with Mark's statement. In this table, 2 prominent discrepancies emerged. First, Bobby heard a tense sound at 6:20 a.m., while Mark described hearing nothing unusual upstairs at the same time and made no mention of Laura possibly being near the back door during that period. Second, Mrs. June's account of movement near the back fence around 6:25 to 6:28 did not match Mark's description that Laura should have been in the kitchen around the time he was preparing to come downstairs. None of the statements definitively confirmed the activity belonged to Laura, but the appearance of movement precisely along the route where the K-9 lost the scent made the data noteworthy. Ultimately, police compiled all witness accounts into a summary table: statement, time, location, direction of movement or sound, level of consistency with Mark's timeline. In this table, 4 sightings were completely ruled out. 2 statements about movement and sound were marked not excluded. and one direct contradiction with Mark's account was assigned high-priority analysis status. These data points were regarded as the first layer of independent information, indicating that the timeline Mark provided was not fully consistent with the real-world observations of those around him. During the same morning timeframe when Laura disappeared, after completing the collection of witness statements and organizing the data for comparison with the initial timeline, police decided to conduct a second interview with Mark Kinsey to confirm the newly emerged information and assess the consistency of his account. The session was conducted under controlled conditions with the goal of clearly presenting each piece of witness-derived data for Mark to respond to directly. First, police restated the 6:20 a.m. time frame in which neighbor Bobby Langford reported hearing a tense sound coming from the area between the two houses. When asked to clarify whether he had heard or participated in any exchange at that time, Mark replied that he might have misheard a small noise in the house but wasn't sure what kind. This was the first change from his initial statement, in which Mark had asserted he only heard an unidentified sound but did not think it was related to any person or specific action. Mark's adjustment in the level of certainty about the sound prompted police to flag discrepancy number 1. The first statement denied any significance to the sound, while the second shifted to the possibility that it was related to movement inside the house. Next, police presented Mrs. June Whitford's statement about the quick movement near the back fence around 6:25 to 6:28. Mark was asked whether he had seen Laura leave the kitchen area or knew if she had exited through the back door during the corresponding time. In his new statement, Mark said it's possible Laura went downstairs to the kitchen earlier than he thought and left through the back door without him noticing. This was the second change, because in the first interview, Mark had stated with certainty that Laura must have been downstairs, possibly in the kitchen, but made no mention of the possibility she left the house. Police flagged this as discrepancy number 2. Mark now opened the possibility that Laura left on her own, contradicting his earlier description that he heard or saw no sign whatsoever that she had approached the back door. To complete the comparison step, investigators asked Mark to reconfirm the time markers he had previously provided, especially the period from 6005 to 6025, the phase for which he was the only self-reported source with no supporting witnesses. In the second statement, Mark said he was not certain about the exact times and that he might have been off by a few minutes because he was still sleepy. This was the third change. As in the initial statement, Mark had described his time estimates with relative confidence regarding when he heard the noise and left the bedroom. The shift from a relatively confident level to uncertainty caused police to note this time frame as low reliability, since the precision of his account had significantly decreased compared to the first interview. After compiling the new statement, police created a direct comparison table between the two interviews. The first column contained the time markers Mark self-provided. The second column, his corresponding action descriptions from the first interview. And the third column, the adjustments or differences in the second interview. The comparison table highlighted at least 3 groups of discrepancies. 1. Perception of sound from unclear and unimportant to possibly related to movement in the house. Toppers. Aim, possibility of Laura leaving on her own from heard and saw nothing to maybe Laura went to the kitchen and out the door without him noticing. 3. Deviation in time markers from clear estimates to uncertain due to still being sleepy. From this data table, police built an internal inconsistency profile, noting that Mark altered his interpretation of the events on the morning of the disappearance when confronted with independent witness data. This profile was not intended to conclude criminal behavior, but to evaluate the credibility of his statements, establishing that the versions Mark provided did not fully match each other in content or timing. These data were flagged as critical for better understanding the unwitnessed time windows and preserved as the basis for further analysis in the case file. 2 days after Laura Kinsey was reported missing, new information was forwarded to the Bloomington Police Department from a Monroe County Forest road maintenance worker. A vehicle matching the license plate registered to Laura appeared in a small parking area near the northern entrance to Hoosier National Forest, close to the intersection with County Road 446. The investigative team immediately went to the scene and confirmed the vehicle, a silver sedan, was parked far from the main road, slightly angled toward the dirt shoulder, with no signs of collision. The car's presence there drew particular attention because the location was entirely off Laura's normal route to work, which headed northwest, completely opposite the forest area. Upon approaching the vehicle, police noted it was locked, but the keys were on the front driver's seat, as if deliberately left behind. The windows were intact, the body showed no significant scratches, and the interior was undisturbed. The driver's seat was adjusted farther back than the position typically used by Laura, as confirmed by family members, and the passenger seat was pulled back several notches, creating unusually wide legroom between the front seats. The front storage compartment contained nothing but an old gas receipt and a box of tissues. In the trunk, items were neatly arranged, with no missing luggage or foreign objects. This data indicated no significant rummaging had occurred inside the vehicle. Around the parking area, police conducted a ground sweep within a 20-meter radius. The soft dirt road, due to dew and moisture, showed some compression marks, but they were not clear enough to identify shoe type or direction of travel. Tire tracks blended with multiple overlapping layers, as the area was occasionally used by forest visitors, making high-precision analysis difficult. Nevertheless, police noted a darkened patch of soil directly behind the rear of the car, possibly from prolonged stopping causing moisture accumulation or from someone standing near that spot. A small drag-like mark extending into the forest trail was flagged and photographed, though not distinctive enough to directly link to the vehicle or victim. While sweeping the area, police checked scattered objects, including paper scraps, soda cans, and food packaging. All were ruled out after verification as unrelated to Laura. No personal items such as a wallet, purse, shoes, jacket, or identification were found in the surrounding area. This reinforced the hypothesis that the victim did not leave the vehicle here voluntarily. Continuing analysis by cross-referencing Laura's work commute history, police confirmed the route to the parking area was completely divergent from every direction Laura had used for months. According to coworkers, Laura always took the shortest route to work and never detoured into the forest area or used Road 446 in the mornings. Local maps showed that from the Kinsey home to the vehicle's location took at least 12 minutes by car under light traffic conditions. This raised two possibilities. Either Laura drove there herself under unusual circumstances, or someone else drove the vehicle to this location in the time frame from 6:31 a.m. when the call was cut off to when the car was first observed around after 8 a.m. Based on the interior analysis and seat adjustments, police began developing the hypothesis that the driver was not Laura. According to relatives, Laura was of modest height and always pulled her driver's seat close to the steering wheel. The current seat position better matched someone taller. The on-scene coordinator proposed the vehicle was most likely driven away from the residential area by another individual and then intentionally abandoned to mislead the search. The fact that the car was locked, but the keys left visibly on the seat, led police to mark this as unusual behavior, suggesting the driver was not overly concerned with concealing evidence or perhaps wanted the vehicle to be found. This abandoned vehicle data was ultimately entered into the system as a major milestone in the disappearance sequence, confirming the victim was no longer in the residential area and was highly likely removed from the initial vicinity by motor vehicle. The information obtained from the vehicle's location became the foundation for redirecting the scope of the investigation and re-evaluating the timelines of those involved that morning. Immediately after Laura's sedan was discovered in the parking area near Hoosier National Forest, the Bloomington Police Department's on-scene technical unit implemented evidence collection procedures according to 1981 standards, focusing primarily on soil samples, dust, grit, and mechanical traces inside the vehicle. First, the forensic team used metal trays and soft brushes to collect fine dirt adhering to the floor mats under the driver's and passenger seats. These samples were sealed, labeled by specific location, and followed by collection of dust particles and small grit from mat grooves and near the pedals. Another sample tray was used to gather soil and organic debris from the trunk for comparison with potential locations the vehicle may have passed through. After transport to the analysis room, the soil samples were examined under a basic optical microscope, the only option available at the time revealing a primary composition of sandy clay mixed with plant impurities, closely matching a forest environment and dissimilar to the soil in front of the Kinsey home, which was richer in organic matter and had different moisture characteristics. This mismatch supported the conclusion that the vehicle had traveled through a different area before being abandoned. Comparing the two sample groups, investigators noted several distinctive angular grit particles commonly found on gravel trails in Hoosier National Forest, further strengthening the likelihood the vehicle had entered the woods before stopping at the parking area. Interior examination focused on the driver's and passenger seat positions. Based on the fixed seat track holes, the technical team recorded that the driver's seat was positioned significantly farther back than the typical use position described by family. The passenger seat was also adjusted farther back than normal, creating an unusually wide front legroom space. Both adjustments contradicted the victim's described driving habits. She typically pulled the seat close to the wheel and rarely moved the passenger seat far back. This data was recorded as a significant indicator that the driver was not Laura. Next, the forensic team surveyed the vehicle exterior to confirm signs of forest travel. Wheel rims and wheel well edges showed a thin layer of dry soil containing small organic fragments, decayed leaf bits and plant fibers, typical of low-traffic forest trails. The undercarriage also bore a lightly cracked dry soil layer characteristic of forest roads after the vehicle exited the area and parked briefly. These observations were photographed, compared with soil samples from the search trail area, and included in the scene report. Regarding fingerprint collection, 1981 technology only allowed retrieval of clear prints on clean, dry surfaces with sufficiently sharp impressions. In this case, the steering wheel, gear shift, and door handles all had multiple overlapping, smudged, or dust-obscured prints, making separation and identification nearly impossible. The technical team attempted lifts from less handled areas such as interior door edges and sun visors, but obtained no prints suitable for comparison. At the time of the investigation, automated fingerprint comparison systems were not widely deployed, so any potentially valuable prints would have required manual comparison, but no clear samples were available. This was a major limitation in identifying the driver. Overall scene evaluation and collected data led the investigative team to compile an evidence table with entries, soil samples, characteristics, and possible origin. Seat positions adjustments inconsistent with user habits. Undercarriage traces compatible with forest roads. Locked door and key left in-car status abnormal for voluntary parking. Fingerprint recovery feasibility not viable. From the data table, a preliminary conclusion was entered into the record. The vehicle showed no signs of being driven by Laura at the time it was abandoned at the parking area. The seat adjustments, non-Kinsey home soil samples, forest road traces, and keys left on the front seat all reinforced the assessment that someone else had used the vehicle after Laura's disappearance, driven it out of the residential area, and abandoned it near Road 446. This conclusion became foundational for the next phase of analyzing the vehicle's travel route and related behaviors in the disappearance, while the technical teams continued processing evidence from the vehicle. The Background and Financial Investigation Unit gathered records related to Mark and Laura to assess whether any potential motive existed that could have led to the victim's disappearance. Mark's financial records were obtained from the local bank where he had an account and a history of paycheck deposits. The report showed Mark had been unemployed for the 3 months prior to Laura's disappearance, after leaving a temporary job at a furniture store. During this period, deposits and withdrawals dropped sharply, and bill payments showed signs of delinquency. Police noted 3 overdue utility bills and a small loan solely in Mark's name. Comparing income to expenses, the records indicated Mark would have been unable to maintain a stable lifestyle without Laura's salary. Continuing the review, investigators discovered a credit card statement with a balance overdue, more than 60 days in Mark's name, including expenditures of unclear purpose during his period of unstable income. This information was classified as a factor potentially creating financial pressure within the household. In contrast, Laura's financial records were significantly more stable. Her bank employee salary, though modest, was regular, with clear transaction history and no large loans. Laura's savings account maintained a steady balance with no unusual withdrawals before the day of her disappearance. Workplace supporting reports confirmed Laura had never mentioned financial difficulties or plans to leave Bloomington. These facts were recorded under no indication related to voluntary departure from residence. After compiling both spouses' financial profiles, police moved to verify Mark's employment history over the preceding year. Data showed he had changed jobs twice in a short period, leaving a warehouse position due to schedule incompatibility, then working 3 months temporarily at the furniture store before quitting. No workplace violations were recorded, but all income sources were short-term and unstable. Investigators noted the situation could lead to economic pressure, but did not directly indicate serious marital conflict. Based on information gathered from relatives and neighbors, police recorded several factors that could cause family tension: Mark's prolonged unemployment, financial dependence on Laura, and recent signs of anxiety. However, no one confirmed witnessing major arguments or violence before the day of the disappearance. The statement about a tense sound around 6:20 a.m. was noted under unidentified sound source and not yet verified as evidence of spousal conflict. Combining the above data, police created a potential motive evaluation table. Financial pressure present, but not particularly severe. Marital relationship stable, according to relative information. No reports of violent behavior. Unusual financial conduct present only on Mark's side, but not directly tied to Laura. Possibility of victim voluntarily leaving, no supporting evidence. From the synthesis of financial and relational profiles, investigators concluded this phase of analysis was insufficient to infer any clear motive directly related to Laura's disappearance. The facts showed economic pressure existed but had not reached a level that could be considered a driver of criminal behavior. The motive assessment was therefore recorded in the file as supplementary information, not conclusive data. By the end of 1981, after weeks of scene examination, vehicle analysis, statement collection, and timeline cross-referencing, the Bloomington Police Department finalized a comprehensive report for the initial investigative phase and determined that Laura Kinsey's disappearance did not meet the legal threshold for prosecution under the standards of that time. Although suspicious elements existed, such as the vehicle abandoned in the forest area, Mark's changing statements, and unverified time markers, these did not form a complete chain of evidence. Most critically, no body or confirmed signs of injury were ever found, keeping the case classified as missing under unknown circumstances rather than violent crime. The absence of a body meant police could not establish a crime, prove criminal conduct, identify a mechanism of offense, locate an instrumentality of crime, determine a cause of death, or find physical traces supporting any specific hypothesis. Forensic reports from 1981, limited by the technology available, found no usable fingerprints in the vehicle, and no samples from inside the car or the surrounding parking area were strong enough to link to a suspect. Additionally, there was no clear alibi or incriminating evidence directly tying Mark or any other individual to the case. Mark's provided timeline contained inconsistencies but was insufficient to establish criminal behavior. Witnesses heard unusual sounds and observed movement behind the Kinsey house on the morning Laura vanished, but no one directly saw Laura leave the house or being forced to leave, and no description was detailed enough to identify a specific individual. All collected data fell into the not excluded category rather than pointing to. In the comprehensive analysis, investigators noted that every investigative avenue pursued close-range search, expansion into Hoosier National Forest, vehicle analysis, financial review, and statement comparison failed to yield additional probative information about the nature of the case. There were no signs indicating the victim left voluntarily, but neither was there evidence confirming Laura was forcibly removed from the home. The abandoned vehicle in the forest was anomalous, but no physical evidence or forensic findings were strong enough to determine who drove it or under what circumstances. Regarding Mark, although his statements were inconsistent, the law did not permit prosecution based on suspicion alone without accompanying physical evidence. This status prevented the case file from advancing further in the prosecutorial process. By 1982, after exhausting all feasible investigative directions given the technical limitations of the era, Bloomington PD officially classified the case as unsolved. In the following months, the file was reviewed on a periodic cycle, but no new data, new witnesses, or supplementary evidence emerged. No agency in the county discovered any items related to Laura during routine operations. By 1985, after 3 years with no new leads, Laura Kinsey's disappearance was reclassified into the inactive file category and officially moved to long-term archival status, becoming a cold case under Indiana State Police protocol. Transferring the file to cold case status did not mean the investigation was permanently closed, but rather acknowledged that all feasible measures at the time had been exhausted without producing the results necessary to continue prosecutorial proceedings or expand the investigation in new directions. After Laura Kinsey's disappearance file was transferred to cold case status in 1985, over the next 3 decades, the case was only reviewed periodically according to the routine re-examination cycles of the Bloomington Police Department and Indiana State Police, but no signs of progress emerged. Each time the file was reopened, new investigators encountered the same set of data, an unindependently verified timeline, witness statements lacking sufficient detail, the Kinsey house scene no longer viable for further analysis, and the abandoned vehicle in the forest providing almost no new forensic value since no useful fingerprints were recovered from the start. Forensic technology during the first 2 decades of this period was not advanced enough to deeply analyze soil samples, fibers, or dust recovered from the vehicle. Techniques such as DNA analysis, microfiber examination, or biological sample comparison had not yet reached the level of development needed to apply to small, contaminated, and weather-affected evidence. Therefore, although the evidence was preserved according to protocol, it could not produce any breakthrough when re-examined. Certain techniques, such as spectroscopy or electron microscopy sample examination, were not yet equipped in Indiana laboratories during this phase, meaning all rechecks were limited to visual observation or basic optical microscopy, yielding no new data. Evidence items, such as soil samples from the vehicle, undercarriage residue, and forest scene photographs were retained only as reference material but could not be further exploited due to technical limitations. The passage of time led to natural degradation of the evidence. Soil samples dried out further, dust dispersed, organic fibers gradually decomposed, reducing examinability. Nevertheless, all evidence remained stored in the cold case vault under proper temperature and humidity controls in anticipation that future technology might allow reanalysis. During the same period, Mark Kinsey's residential history changed significantly. Address records show he left Bloomington in the late 1980s, moved briefly to Greenwood, then relocated to 2 other counties in Indiana. Each change of residence was documented in civil records, but none triggered events that prompted police to restart the investigation. There were no criminal acts, no reports related to domestic violence, and no conduct that created a legal basis to reconnect Mark to the disappearance under the standards of the time. Mark's multiple relocations were viewed only as normal behavior in the context of economic fluctuations and not evaluated as evidence of criminal activity. In the 1990s and early 2000s, Bloomington PD periodically reviewed cold case files, including Laura's, but no new witnesses came forward. No additional statements were obtained, and no new evidence was discovered in the Hoosier National Forest area. These reviews produced only reports reiterating prior conclusions. No body, no physical evidence, no defined time of offense, and no basis for expanding the investigation. Some younger investigators in the late 2000s attempted re-examination by cross-referencing missing persons files from neighboring counties, but no matching cases were found. Cross-checks against lists of unidentified bodies or homeless individuals also yielded no results. All of this kept the case in a static state. By 2010, with advances in DNA technology, small evidence items in other cases were successfully reanalyzed. But the evidence in the Laura Kinsey case still did not meet the threshold for testing due to the lack of clear biological samples. No blood, hair with roots, or soft tissue from the outset. Investigators noted that given the nature of the case missing under unknown circumstances, no body, no signs of violence, the potential for applying new forensic technology remained very limited. At the end of 3 decades of stagnation, Laura Kinsey's case became one of Bloomington's longest-standing cold cases, with all data remaining in an unprogressible state due to the lack of both legal and scientific leverage to deepen the investigation. The case file was still fully preserved, but remained at inactive status, awaiting a new condition that could reactivate the analytical process. In 2015, during Indiana State Police's program to review long-term missing persons files, Laura Kinsey's case was officially transferred to the Cold Case Unit for re-evaluation using modern technology and analytical methods. This was the first time since the mid-1980s that the entire file was reopened under a full reinvestigation protocol rather than mere procedural review as in previous periodic checks. The Cold Case Unit's first step was to digitize the entire set of paper documents preserved for 3 decades: scene collection reports, 1981 forensic reports, witness statements, vehicle scene photographs, Mark's interview transcripts, maps of the Kinsey residence area, Hoosier National Forest search scene photos, and contemporaneous operational notes. These documents had previously existed only in paper form, prone to degradation and difficult to access. Digitization allowed the new investigative team to easily analyze multiple data layers simultaneously and cross-reference them using software tools. Concurrently, all remaining physical evidence, including soil samples taken from the vehicle, organic debris fragments, trail trace photographs, and the recording of the interrupted 6:31 a.m. emergency call was reinventoried and categorized according to applicability for modern analytical techniques. Although much of the evidence no longer held biological examinability value, the 6:31 a.m. call recording became one of the highest priority items for initial review. 2015 audio processing technology enabled noise separation, clarity enhancement, and amplitude analysis far beyond 1981 capabilities. Upon reprocessing the recording, the Cold Case Unit noted that background audio showed signs of rapid movement in the final fractions of a second before the line was cut. This new data did not identify the source of the sound, but indicated the call did not end due to technical failure. Rather, it involved physical interference in close proximity to the caller. This was flagged as a new element not fully analyzed in the original investigation phase. Next, using archived weather data for October 17, 1981, from the Meteorological Agency, the team re-examined auditory and visual perception conditions during the 6:20 to 6:34 a.m. window, the time frame aligning with Mark's timeline and witness statements. Meteorological records showed high humidity and dense fog, making distant observation difficult but simultaneously increasing sound diffusion in the confined backyard space behind the Kinsey house. This made Bobby Langford's statement about hearing a tense exchange more noteworthy than its initial assessment. The cold case unit created an acoustic spatial map based on the neighborhood layout, identifying possible sound reflection points that could carry voices from the back door to the adjacent yard, allowing re-evaluation of the witness statement's plausibility. Subsequently, the team reassessed Mark's timeline by integrating old data with new movement modeling, distance from bedroom to kitchen, reasonable time to descend the stairs, average time to notice the open back door, and the 6:31 a.m. call disconnect time compared to Mark's claimed 6:34 a.m. discovery of Laura missing. When all data was entered into spreadsheets, the cold case unit found that Mark's claim of hearing nothing unusual while passing through the upstairs hallway did not align with the reconstructed acoustic conditions simulated by software. Estimates indicated that if a tense exchange occurred around 6:20, as the witness described, Mark, standing in the hallway with the bedroom door open, would very likely have heard at least background volume. This marked a new discrepancy, not because the witness account was absolutely accurate, but because the house's distance and structure made Mark's claim of hearing nothing less reasonable than the 1981 analysis had concluded. The cold case unit continued evaluating vehicle movement possibilities. 1981 Bloomington maps were digitized and imported into simulation software. Based on average driving speeds along the route from the Kinsey home to the forest parking area, travel time was approximately 12 to 14 minutes, aligning with the window from the call disconnect to when a witness passing County Road 446 reported seeing an unfamiliar parked car around 6:45 to 7:07 a.m. This new analysis reinforced the likelihood that the vehicle was driven out of the residential area shortly after the emergency call. During the reconstruction modeling process, the cold case unit rebuilt the 1981 timeline using a layered method: Mark statement layer, witness data layer, physical evidence layer, environmental data layer, and vehicle movement layer. When overlaid, the period from 6005 to 6025, previously considered an unverified window, was now flagged as the region with highest probability of event occurrence due to alignment with witness reports of sound and movement behind the house. The analysis also uncovered a previously unrecorded discrepancy from 1981. March claimed small noise at 6:20 did not match the reconstructed acoustic model, which placed the likely origin of the sound downstairs, where Mark asserted Laura should have been in the kitchen. Mark's failure to mention any movement by his wife during that period created a new logical gap in the timeline. After integrating all data, the cold case unit constructed a restructured 1981 timeline identifying 1. Time markers Mark could not substantiate or that were inconsistent with environmental data. 2. Witness-reported markers with high alignment to acoustic conditions. 3. The probable window for the vehicle to leave the Kinsey home and reach the forest parking area. Schweffer, the K9 scent loss point aligning with a rapid movement direction along the path. The restructured timeline was the first document in 30 years to present a more logically connected picture of the disappearance. Morning, tightly linking statements, field data, and scientific analysis while opening new investigative directions never evaluated in the original phase. After completing the 1981 timeline reconstruction, the cold case unit moved to modern forensic analysis of the evidence, focusing on two key areas: Laura Kinsey's home and the abandoned sedan in the forest. At the home scene, the technical unit returned to the kitchen sink location noted in the 1981 report as no unusual signs, and tested it with luminol to detect previously overlooked clean traces due to technical limitations at the time. When luminol was evenly sprayed across the stainless steel surface and around the sink rim, a faint glowing halo appeared in the right rear corner near the faucet, elongated along the natural curve of the basin. No clear blood sample remained for DNA extraction, but the glow pattern indicated an organic substance had been washed or wiped there. The forensic report noted that the luminol reaction could not determine timing and could not conclude it was human blood, but the presence of a previously unrecorded cleaning trace was added to the list of data requiring cross-reference with Mark's morning behavior in the timeline. Shifting to the vehicle, the cold case unit processed microfiber samples from the car seats using scanning electron microscopy technology unavailable locally in 1981. SEM analysis revealed two distinct microfiber groups on the driver's and passenger seats. The first group was common polyester fibers from vehicle upholstery, while the second was pale cotton acrylic blend fibers lodged in the passenger seat creases. These cotton fibers did not match clothing Laura typically wore to work per coworker-provided photos, and the weave pattern did not correspond to fabrics confirmed owned by Mark in background reports. The fiber samples were entered into the comparison system to record characteristics, but could not yet be attributed to an owner. Next, the cold case unit recollected two hairs caught on the right rear door edge, evidence previously deemed valueless in 1981 due to lacking roots. Using 2015 DNA technology, even without nuclear cells, the lab performed mtDNA testing for maternal line genetic comparison. The mtDNA results showed the hairs did not match Laura and also did not match reference samples from Laura's relatives. While this did not identify anyone, it opened the possibility that another individual outside the victim's family had been present in the vehicle. This trace was recorded as independent data supporting the hypothesis that the car was not driven by Laura before abandonment. Additionally, the modern forensic team reanalyzed undercarriage soil samples using high-resolution X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy. XRF revealed characteristic mineral composition, kaolinite, illite, and a small proportion of granular iron oxide. Cross-referencing with detailed 2015 geological maps of Monroe County, the undercarriage soil most strongly matched the area around Salt Creek, a small tributary deep in the forest, approximately 2.7 miles as the crow flies from the parking area where the car was found. This soil differed significantly from trail soil near the parking area and was incompatible with soil in front of the Kinsey home, indicating the vehicle had contact with creek bank terrain or a water-adjacent path before appearing at the parking spot. This mineral data was confirmed by comparison with 12 reference soil samples from surrounding areas, with only the Salt Creek group showing over 80% similarity. Furthermore, small decayed leaf debris in the undercarriage was pollen analyzed, revealing the presence of streamside plant species that grew only along Salt Creek in the fall of 1981. All this data formed the first strong geological indicator set in the case, confirming the vehicle's travel route was not limited to Road 446 as early analysis suggested, but most likely extended deeper into Hoosier National Forest before returning and being abandoned. The modern forensic results were compiled into a consolidated data table, luminol in sink cleaning trace present but source unidentified, seat microfibers inconsistent with victim, DNA hair not Laura's, XRF soil matches Salt Creek, pollen sample consistent with unique streamside flora. These findings enabled the cold case unit to reconstruct a potential vehicle movement map and identify Salt Creek as the sole geographic area with material match, making that location the new survey focal point for the investigation. The new forensic information matching the Salt Creek area prompted the cold case unit to further expand the scope of analysis to behavioral factors, with particular focus on Mark Kinsey, the only person present in the house with Laura on the morning she disappeared. At this point, an unexpected source emerged. Rebecca Collins, Mark's ex-wife from his second marriage, which lasted from the mid-1990s to the early 2000s, proactively contacted the cold case unit and stated that she had once discovered numerous hidden debt documents belonging to Mark, along with several unusual behaviors during their time living together. The data provided by Rebecca was received according to proper procedure, documented, and forwarded to the background analysis team. First, Rebecca submitted a file containing overdue tax invoices, debt collection receipts, and property repossession warnings from 1997-2001. Many of these debts originated before Mark married Rebecca, indicating he had accumulated personal debt starting in the late 1980s and continued making partial payments until 1995. These documents were flagged as undeclared outstanding debt because, according to Rebecca, Mark had never disclosed the existence of these debts to her. After cross-referencing, the cold case unit observed an unusually similar pattern of debt concealment to the financial data obtained from the 1981 period, in which Mark was also named on small loans and overdue bills but had never mentioned them to Laura, as concluded in the original investigation. In addition to the documents, Rebecca provided personal notes she had kept when their marriage became unstable. These included records of Mark repeatedly changing explanations when questioned about spending, unexplained morning absences, and several multi-hour periods on different days that could not be verified. These notes were not direct evidence, but created a behavioral pattern that matched the inconsistencies in Mark's 1981 statements, particularly the unprovable time windows on the morning Laura disappeared. Rebecca also submitted an envelope containing documents she described as found randomly in the house after Mark left following their divorce. Inside was a list of personal loans Mark had signed in 1980, right around the time of Laura's disappearance, showing he had borrowed money to invest in a small business venture but was unable to repay it. The file indicated Mark received at least 2 debt collection notices in September and October 1981, one of which was sent just 4 days before Laura disappeared. This was the first time the cold case unit obtained verifiable evidence of Mark's financial pressure precisely at the time of the incident. Rebecca continued describing behaviors Mark exhibited during their second marriage: avoiding financial discussions, becoming tense when questioned about debt, frequent unannounced morning absences, and consistently altering details when describing his personal schedule. Combining this account with the 1981 data, the cold case unit created a behavioral comparison table across 2 periods. 1. Behavior related to financial concealment. 2. Behavior related to concealing schedule. 3. Behavior involving evasion when pressed for details. In both periods, 1981 and the time living with Rebecca, the manifestations were consistent. This pattern was categorized as recurring behavior over time, a form of supporting data for background analysis, showing Mark exhibited a stable behavioral tendency, concealing debt, avoiding confrontation, and frequently being unable to account for blank periods during the day. Finally, the cold case unit analyzed the connection between the documents Rebecca submitted and the 1981 credit file. Both sets of records showed Mark facing the risk of asset repossession or civil lawsuit if debts were not paid on time. The timing of the debt documents close to Laura's disappearance created a financial pressure timeline that had not been deeply investigated earlier due to lack of data. Although the information Rebecca provided did not directly establish criminal conduct, it opened a new behavioral data layer, showing Mark had a capacity to conceal important information during periods of pressure and a long history of financial non-transparency spanning decades. The cold case unit recorded this data in the file as a basis for reevaluating potential motive, morning behavior on the day of the disappearance, and the time markers provided in 1981. Based on all modern forensic data, digitized old evidence, new geological analysis, witness statements, and Mark's behavioral profile, the cold case unit undertook one of the most critical steps in the reinvestigation process, reconstructing the most plausible vehicle movement route on the morning of October 17, 1981. The focus was to determine whether Laura's sedan could have been driven along which route, stopped where, and at what times, and whether those time markers aligned with the approximately 110 minutes Mark could not account for with an alibi. The reconstruction process began by inputting all forensic data from the vehicle: undercarriage soil matching the Salt Creek area, characteristic streamside plant pollen, microfibers and hair samples not belonging to Laura, tire marks indicating the car had traveled gravel trails before parking. Next, the team entered 1981 Bloomington maps, including road layouts, forest density at the time, unbarricaded entrances to Salt Creek, and especially unpaved secondary routes that have since been widened or closed. These secondary dirt roads explained why geological data could match deep forest areas locations difficult for vehicles to access today but fully accessible by sedan in 1981 if the driver knew the terrain. When integrating time data, the cold case unit began constructing a feasible route. From the Kinsey home in a quiet residential area, the vehicle headed southeast, crossing small connecting roads to County Road 446, then continuing deeper into the forest near Salt Creek. Simulation of average speeds 30 to 35 miles per hour on paved roads of the era, then dropping to 10 to 15 miles per hour on dirt yielded a travel time from the house to Salt Creek of only about 14 to 18 minutes. This unexpectedly aligned with the window from the interrupted emergency call to when a witness reported seeing an unfamiliar car near 446 around 6:45-6:50 a.m. When examining the space around Salt Creek, The cold case unit mapped locations of abandoned wells, rock pits, sinkholes, or terrain features capable of concealing an object short-term without leaving clear surface traces. Many abandoned wells from the 1980s no longer exist or have been filled, but 1981 land records noted at least 4 deep well sites near southern tributary branches. Based on the geological data from the vehicle undercarriage, the cold case unit selected the area near well number 3 in the old land records as the primary focus point, since soil samples near that well matched 82% with the undercarriage samples. With this data, the reconstructed route model was as follows. Vehicle leaves Kinsey home between 6:31 and 6:33 and treks, approaches Old Road number 2, 3 from 6:34 to 6:40, enters Salt Creek area from 6:40 to 6:45 2, stops near the well for an undetermined period falling within Mark's timeline gap, departs Salt Creek to the 446 parking area from 7:15 to 7,025, abandons the vehicle and leaves the area. This model was judged the most reasonable among dozens generated because it satisfied all physical evidence, witness statements, feasible 1981 travel speeds, and especially the approximately 110 minutes Mark could not prove an alibi for in the reanalyzed timeline from 6:05 to 7:55 a.m. Within this time frame, the cold case unit identified 3 segments of absolutely unverifiable time: 6,562, 6,226, 31, and 6,031 and 631, 740. When building the time location map model, the cold case unit used simulation algorithms to determine minimum and maximum durations for each leg of travel, marking points where Mark could or could not have been present, based on his statements, physical evidence, and environmental data. The complete model showed Mark had sufficient time to drive the vehicle from the house to Salt Creek, stop at the well area, handle an unidentified object or action, then drive the car to 446 and abandon it before returning toward Greenwood Road, where he claimed he began searching for Laura. The route reconstruction report was prepared as a legal document with diagrams, timelines, and distance estimates, serving as the basis for the cold case unit to prepare an application for an arrest warrant, as legal standards require demonstrating the reasonableness and feasibility of the conduct along a timeline, not speculation, but grounded in scientific, geological, environmental, and cross-referenced statement data. Thus, for the first time in 30 years, the Laura Kinsey case had a fully reconstructed movement route capable of linking physical evidence, witnesses, and human behavior into a logical and consistent sequence. Based on the route reconstruction report, modern forensic analysis, behavioral cross-referencing, and Mark's unaccounted time markers, the cold case unit completed the legal file and submitted it to the Monroe County Court to request an arrest warrant. The file included luminol results at the sink, microfiber and mtDNA analysis from the vehicle, geological match to Salt Creek, time location model showing approximately 110 minutes of no alibi for Mark, and comparison table of Mark's 1981 statements against 2015 real-world data. The court evaluated this as a systematic scientific body of evidence, not based on personal conjecture, and meeting the probable cause standard to proceed with arrest for investigative purposes. Mark was arrested at his residence in early November 2015, when he was in his mid-50s and had been living a quiet life for many years after leaving Bloomington. In the interrogation room, the cold case unit employed a strategy of questioning based entirely on scientific data, avoiding any emotional confrontation. Investigators presented Mark with the vehicle route reconstruction model, undercarriage soil and pollen analysis uniquely matching Salt Creek, and the vehicle movement timeline inconsistent with his 1981 statements. Mark initially maintained denial, repeating his old account that he woke up late, heard a small noise, and then discovered Laura missing. However, when investigators presented the 1981-2015 statement comparison table listing 3 major groups of contradictions: 1. The timing of the noise he claimed to hear did not align with simulated acoustic conditions. 2. His assertion that he neither heard nor saw Laura leave the kitchen while a witness observed movement behind the house. And 3. His inability to explain the 110-minute gap in the timeline. Mark shifted to a defensive posture. The cold case unit continued presenting forensic data, vehicle seat microfibers inconsistent with Laura, hair samples not belonging to the victim's family, and especially soil matching the deep well area at Salt Creek, a location never searched in 1981. Investigators did not draw conclusions or make direct accusations, but asked Mark to explain the data in whatever way he considered reasonable. After hours of silence, Mark was shown diagrams of Salt Creek along with trails that existed in 1981. Investigators pointed out the time window from 6:31 to 7:41 to 7:40 a.m. sufficient to leave the house, reach Salt Creek, stop, and drive the car back to the parking area. When asked if he could have been anywhere else during that period, Mark offered no evidence or witness to confirm. Mark's demeanor changed markedly when investigators presented the 1981 record showing he had asserted never left the house between 6 and 7 a.m., directly contradicting the vehicle movement model based on geological and trail evidence. Next, the cold case unit presented documents submitted by Rebecca, loans Mark signed before Laura's disappearance, along with debt repossession warnings sent in the very week Laura vanished. Investigators did not demand answers but asked Mark to explain why these documents had never been presented before. The recurring behavioral data across 2 marriages, concealing debt, altering statements when questioned, and mourning absences was listed as a behavioral pattern rather than an accusation. The combination of scientific evidence and the repeated behavioral chain placed Mark in a passive position. He could not deny the physical evidence and could not provide a reasonable explanation for the vehicle's route. After many hours of interrogation, Mark showed signs of wavering when investigators directly referenced Salt Creek, the only area matching all geological evidence. He remained silent for a long time, then requested a more detailed 1981 land map. When the well area map was placed in front of him, Mark bowed his head, clasped his hands, and for the first time made an admission. "If you search, you'll find it there." He pointed to the location marked as well known, 3 on the map. Investigators asked for clarification, and Mark described a deep well, a narrow dirt path leading in, and said Laura was down there. Although the statement was incomplete, the location information Mark provided for the Salt Creek well fully matched the geological data from the vehicle undercarriage and pollen on the evidence. The interrogation record was immediately prepared, marking the first time in over 3 decades since October 17, 1981, that the Laura Kinsey case had direct information about the body's hiding place from the last person known to have seen the victim. Immediately after Mark identified Wilnenier, 3, at the Salt Creek area, Indiana State Police coordinated with the FBI Evidence Response Team to secure the entire forest zone and initiate specialized excavation procedures according to standards for recovering remains in hazardous terrain. Well, no. 3 was a vertical stone-lined shaft approximately 1 meter in diameter and over 10 meters deep for 1981 land records. With the opening obscured by decades of accumulated leaf litter and root overgrowth, the area was divided into multiple safety perimeters, with excavation, forensic, scene documentation, and winch operation teams working in coordination. Each layer above the well mouth was peeled away using stratigraphic method, an organic layer about 20 centimeters thick of decayed leaves and roots. Below that, a sandy soil layer with low cohesion, similar in characteristics to the vehicle undercarriage samples. Deeper still, a gray clay layer mixed with rock fragments. All items in each layer were collected in separate stainless trays, coated with time and depth for stratigraphic analysis to avoid disturbing burial sequence. At approximately 3.8 meters depths, the excavation team discovered small fragments of decayed fabric mixed in the clay, colors matching the clothing Laura was described wearing in the 1981 file. In the next layer, near 4.3 m depth, a small skeletal structure emerged, first a forearm segment, followed by several disarticulated bone fragments in a confined area, indicating the body had been thrown down the well without arrangement. Bone collection was performed with precision tools, soft brushes, small surgical scalpels, and bone brushes. Each bone portion was marked for orientation, position, and depth for later reconstruction. Continuing downward, the team found the skull fractured along the left side, with sharp, irregular breaks characteristic of blunt force trauma before death. At the well bottom, small metal fragments were discovered, later identified as part of a necklace clasp, along with a deformed earring consistent with accessories Laura commonly wore. Clothing recovered included rotted cotton and polyester fabric pieces, but colors and patterns were sufficient to match the outfit noted in coworker statements. All items were sealed, coded, photographed in 3D, and transferred to the lab. Bone collection concluded when the team reached the well bottom at about 10 meters depth, where a thick, damp clay layer showed no further related objects. The entire skeletal remains were transferred to the ISP forensic unit, where they were anatomically reassembled and mechanical injuries documented. Results showed beyond the left skull fracture, the victim had 2 ribs fractured in a compression pattern consistent with strong force to the chest. The right humerus exhibited a spiral fracture suggesting heavy impact from behind or during dragging. No knife cuts or bullet wounds were present. All injuries were consistent with severe blunt force trauma before the fall into the well. The forensic unit concluded the cause of death was most likely traumatic brain injury from heavy impact, occurring before or at the moment the victim was pushed into the well. After morphological bone analysis, the forensic team extracted samples from teeth and femur for DNA. 2015 technology allowed DNA recovery even from decomposed soft tissue and bone. DNA comparison was performed against samples from Laura Kinsey's living mother and brother, yielding a 99.99% match, confirming the remains were Laura's, missing since October 1981. This result, together with all evidence recovered from the Salt Creek well, was fully documented in legal reports, concluding the excavation phase and marking the first time in over 30 years that the location where the victim was hidden had been confirmed by irrefutable scientific evidence. After the Salt Creek well excavation and DNA confirmation of the victim's identity, the entire investigative file spanning more than 3 decades was transferred to the Monroe County Prosecutor's Office to initiate prosecution proceedings against Mark Kinsey. The prosecutor prepared an indictment including 3 main groups of evidence. 1. Modern forensic data vehicle undercarriage soil, matching Salt Creek, stream-side pollen, non-Laura microfibers and mdDNA, sink luminol traces, bone injuries confirming pre-death trauma. 2. Restructured 1981 timeline, precise reconstruction of each unverifiable time marker for Mark, especially the 110-minute gap allowing travel from the house to Salt Creek, body handling, vehicle transport to the parking area, and return. 3. Behavioral data inconsistent statements, 1981-2015, decades-long pattern of financial concealment, and indirect admission of the body location during interrogation. At the trial held in late 2016, the prosecution presented the forensic file in scientific sequence, emphasizing that the modern investigation relied not on conjecture, but on independent layers of evidence reinforcing one another. Before the jury, the prosecution compared Mark's 1981 statements with empirical data. Mark asserted never left the house between 6:77, yet the movement model and soil data showed the vehicle traveled deep into Salt Creek during that window. Mark claimed heard no unusual sounds, while acoustic simulation proved a tense exchange would have been clearly audible from the upstairs hallway. Mark stated did not know where Laura was after 6:31, yet his own direction to well number 3 was the sole information that led forensic teams to the body. These comparisons were not used as emotional inference, but as logical chains grounded in science and experiment. Defense counsel argued that Mark's interrogation admission was not a direct confession, and forensic evidence was only highly probable rather than absolute proof of murder. However, the jury evaluated the scientific evidence system, especially undercarriage geological data, stream-side pollen, and bone trauma as objective and independent of subjective investigator inference. The discovery of Laura's body precisely where Mark described, after more than 30 years, was also deemed by the jury a pivotal indicator establishing body concealment behavior. At the close of arguments, the prosecution stressed that the case could not be resolved in 1981 due to the absence of a body and limited forensic technology. But in 2015-2016, every link could be connected: morning behavior, vehicle route, environmental evidence, bone injuries, and DNA data. After 4 days of deliberation, the jury found Mark Kinsey guilty of first-degree murder and abuse of a corpse to conceal criminal activity. The judge imposed a sentence of life without parole, noting this as the longest-standing missing persons case resolved in Monroe County with a full conviction after 34 years. With this decision, the Laura Kinsey file, once in cold case status for nearly 3 decades, was officially closed, with all scientific and legal evidence unified into a complete explanatory chain, ending an investigative journey spanning 2 generations of investigators. In the Laura Kinsey case, what gives many Americans pause for reflection is not only the tragedy of a young woman disappearing in 1981, but also how technology, persistence, and transparency in personal relationships can determine life, justice, and community trust. The story shows that investigators of that era were constrained by rudimentary forensic technology, allowing a serious case to reach a dead end for over 3 decades. Only in 2015, when DNA technology, soil analysis, and movement route reconstruction achieved high accuracy, did the truth gradually emerge. The lesson here fits modern American society, where science is not just progress, but a tool to protect justice. One noteworthy detail is the evolution of Mark's statements over the years, from denying hearing any noise to being unable to explain 110 minutes without alibi, and finally directing police to the exact Salt Creek well. This reminds today's Americans that concealing behavior, even seemingly small matters in daily life, such as debt or opaque schedules, can always lead to major consequences. In a society that values honesty and personal responsibility, the case reflects that lack of transparency in relationships, especially marriage, can lead to tragedy extending beyond the family and across generations. Additionally, the fact that Mark's second wife Rebecca proactively provided documents to authorities highlights the importance of community cooperation with law enforcement. In the United States, where local investigative units often operate independently with limited resources, citizen assistance can be the key to solving cases that appear hopeless. Finally, the Laura case reminds us that justice, though slow, is not lost, and the civic responsibility today is to remember that truth can always be found if society collectively upholds transparency, science, and integrity. Thank you for following this cold case story spanning more than 3 decades. If you found value in the journey to restore justice for Laura Kinsey, please subscribe so you don't miss the next cases uncovered through science and persistence. See you in the next video, where we continue exploring how truth ultimately always finds its way back to the light.